Before we dive in, here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with what Claude actually is and why it's different from a typical AI chatbot. Then we'll explore the core principles behind how it's built, the capabilities that make it useful for everyday work, and the different ways you can use it across web, desktop, mobile, coding, design, collaboration, and Microsoft 365. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear understanding of what Claude is, what it can do, and why so many people think of it as more than just another AI assistant. Let's start with the basic question. What is Claude, really? It's easy to lump it in with every other chatbot out there, but that framing sells it short. Claude is built to be a thinking partner, something you work alongside, not just something you query. To understand why that works, it helps to look at a few key ideas about how Claude is built. We'll start right at the foundation with the principle that shapes everything else Claude does. First and most important, Claude is built to be helpful, harmless, and honest. That's not just a slogan. It comes from an approach called constitutional AI, where Claude is trained against a set of principles that steer it away from toxic or discriminatory output and away from helping with anything illegal or unethical. The result is a system that's trying at a structural level to align with human values and to operate transparently, rather than just optimizing to sound agreeable. Moving to the second pattern worth knowing, Claude is more than a chatbot. It handles a wide range of conversational and text processing work, summarizing, searching, writing creatively, answering questions, coding, and plenty more, all with a fairly high degree of reliability. But the better mental model is a thought partner, something you bring a messy, half-formed problem to, not just a search box you type a question into. Here's something that makes a real difference in practice. Claude is steerable and collaborative. You can give it direction on personality, tone, and behavior, and it actually follows that direction. Companies using Claude report it's less likely to produce harmful output, easier to back and forth conversation with, and more steerable overall, meaning you spend less effort wrestling the tool into giving you what you actually wanted. And one more foundational point before we move on, you can access Claude wherever you already work. It's available across free, Pro, Max, Team, and Enterprise plans. And once you're signed in, your conversations, projects, memory, and preferences all sync across devices. Whether you're at your desk or working from your phone, it's the same Claude, picking up right where you left off. Now that we've covered the foundations, let's get into what Claude can actually do day to day. The core capabilities that make it useful across so many different kinds of work. Take writing and content creation. Say you're drafting a social post, a tricky professional email, or a full report, Claude can collaborate with you on all of it. Because it's built to take direction on personality and tone, you're not stuck with generic output. You iterate together on structure and clarity until it actually sounds like you. Next up is research and analysis, and this is where things get especially useful for anyone drowning in documents. Claude helps you explore different angles, pull findings together, and dig into data to surface insight you might have missed. You can upload documents directly, and Claude will help you make sense of the complexity. Here's the number worth remembering. Claude's context window can take in 200,000 plus tokens, roughly 500 pages of text, with up to a full 1,000,000 tokens available on Pro, Max, Team, and Enterprise plans. That's the difference between skimming a document and actually reasoning across all of it at once. Coding is next, and honestly, it's one of Claude's strongest areas. Whether you're writing something from scratch, debugging a stubborn issue, or just need code explained in plain English, Claude performs well across real-world coding tasks and multiple languages. Then there's problem solving and reasoning, the harder cognitive stuff. Picture a complex strategic question or a gnarly math problem. Claude's recent Opus and Sonnet models are hybrid, meaning they offer two modes: near instant answers for quick things, and extended thinking for when a problem actually needs to be worked through step by step. And here's the real difference worth remembering. Instant mode is for quick answers. Extended thinking is for the hard stuff that benefits from careful, methodical analysis instead of a fast guess. Last on the capability side is learning new things. Think about picking up an unfamiliar skill or working through a concept you don't fully understand yet. Claude adapts to your pace and style, and there's a dedicated learning mode that actually guides your reasoning process instead of just handing you the answer, which matters if the goal is to actually understand something, not just get past it. So that's what Claude can do. Now let's talk about where you actually go to use it, because the same intelligence shows up in a handful of different places, each suited to a different kind of task. Claude.ai, along with its desktop and mobile apps, is the main hub, the place for open-ended conversations, writing help, research, analysis, and creating files. If you're just getting started, this is almost certainly where you'll spend most of your time. For developers, or really anyone comfortable working close to their file system, there's Claude Code. It's an agentic coding tool that can directly edit files, run commands, and even create commits, which makes it useful well beyond just writing new code. If your team lives in Slack, there's @Claude. You can bring Claude directly into the AI Assistant header from any channel or tag it into a thread. Once Slack is connected, Claude can search your workspace's channels, direct messages, and shared files to pull in the context it needs for a genuinely useful answer. For visual and product work, there's Claude Design, a dedicated space where you describe what you want or start from a sketch or screenshot, and Claude builds an actual interactive prototype you can refine and hand off to your team. And finally, if your day already runs through Microsoft 365, Claude shows up right there too, as a sidebar in Excel, PowerPoint, Word, and Outlook. And you can analyze, draft, and edit inside the document you already have open and carry that same context from one app to the next. So here's the through line that ties all of this together. Claude isn't just answering questions in isolation, it's a steerable, trustworthy thinking partner, built on principles that keep it honest, capable across almost any kind of work, and available in whatever tool you already reach for. That combination, capability plus trust plus reach, is really what Claude is. Let's put all of this into practice by walking through an actual conversation, start to finish, right inside the Claude desktop interface. Here's the chat tab, already selected, with nothing on the screen yet but a quiet pulse waiting for you to begin. Starting a conversation is genuinely this simple. There's no setup ritual, no configuration you have to get right first. You just start. Before typing anything though, say you've already got the groundwork sitting in a folder somewhere, market notes, a competitor deck, maybe a template your team already uses. Attaching one of those files up front means Claude isn't starting from zero. Think of it as a shortcut. Instead of explaining your entire situation in paragraph form, you hand over the document and Claude reads the context directly from it. Next, it's worth deciding what this particular conversation actually needs. Here's web search and extended thinking sitting there as simple switches. If the task calls for current information, you flip on web search. If it's the kind of problem that benefits from careful, step-by-step reasoning rather than a fast answer, extended thinking is the one to reach for. Neither is required every time. The point is choosing on purpose instead of leaving it to default. Here's something that pays off over the long run. Picking a style before you even send your first message. Concise, formal, explanatory, or something fully custom that you describe yourself. Once it's set, it doesn't just apply to this one reply, it carries across every future conversation too, so you're not restating your preferences again and again. Now for the prompt itself, and this is where the earlier framework actually earns its keep. Notice the structure as it's typed out, setting the stage by explaining who's asking and why, defining the exact task at hand, and specifying the rules for format and tone. That's not accidental. A prompt built this way, like you're briefing a sharp coworker, tends to get a far more useful answer back than a vague one-liner ever could. Once it's sent, here's what's actually happening behind the scenes. Claude reads the uploaded file first, then researches the current market, works out how competitors are positioned, and drafts the report, each step visible, each one building on the last. This isn't a black box, it's a sequence, and every stage is doing real work toward the final answer. And here's the response, a full structured report delivered in one pass. But the real power of Claude isn't a single great answer, it's what happens next. Picture sending a quick follow-up, asking for the executive summary to be tightened up instead of starting over or accepting something that's almost right. Watch how fast that lands. One small note and the whole section gets rewritten, tighter, leading straight with the number that matters most. This is the natural rhythm of working with Claude. Bite-sized prompts, chained together, each one steering a little closer to exactly what you needed. And here's a nice bit of follow-through. Claude offers to remember the tone you landed on, so next time you don't have to ask for concise and data-driven all over again. Approve it, and that preference is saved to memory for good. That's really the whole loop worth remembering. Set the stage, define the task, specify the rules, iterate freely, and let memory and style carry the parts you'd rather not repeat. Now let's talk about something that happens to everyone who works with Claude, sooner or later. The first response you get isn't always the one you wanted, and that's not a failure, it's completely normal. What matters is knowing how to recognize what went wrong and fix it quickly, instead of just trying again and hoping for something better. Let's start with the most common challenges you'll actually run into and the specific fix for each one. First up, the response comes back too generic. Here's what's actually happening. Your prompt didn't include enough context about your specific situation, so Claude filled in the gaps with something safe and broad. Picture asking for an email about the project delay versus telling Claude exactly who it's for, how many times this has happened before, and what tone to strike. The fix is simple. Add details about your audience, your role, or your constraints. The more specific the ask, the more specific the answer comes back. Moving to the second one, the response is too long or too short. This isn't Claude being careless, it's Claude guessing because nothing told it what length you actually wanted. So be explicit. Say 2 paragraphs, say under 100 words. Or say, I need this comprehensive, length isn't a concern. Removing the guesswork removes the problem. Next, Claude didn't follow your format. Here's the distinction worth understanding. Claude usually understood exactly what you wanted, just not how you wanted it laid out on the page. And here's the real fix worth remembering. Show, don't just tell. Give an example of the format, or spell out the structure directly, like bullet points with bold headers for each section. This next one matters more than the others. You got confident-sounding information that turned out to be wrong. Claude can occasionally generate plausible but incorrect details, especially around specific facts or niche topics. For anything high stakes, verify the key facts independently. Ask Claude to cite its sources or flip on web search so the answer is grounded in something current and real, not just a fluent guess. And last on this list, the tone isn't right. Claude defaults to helpful and professional, which is a fine default, but it isn't always what your situation calls for. Describe the tone you actually want in plain language. More conversational, more authoritative, or just hand over an example of the style you're going for. Now here's a mindset shift that changes everything about how these fixes actually land. Your first prompt with Claude rarely produces a perfect result, and that's fine. Think of it as the start of a conversation, not a one-shot request you either nail or don't. Say Claude hands you a first draft. The move isn't to accept it or scrap it. It's to review it like you'd review a colleague's rough pass. Identify what's working, flag what isn't, and refine from there. Treating that first output as a starting point, not a final answer, changes the whole dynamic of working with Claude. When you do give feedback, be specific about it. Make it shorter, works fine. But cut the first 2 paragraphs and make the conclusion more action-oriented gets you to the right answer faster, with far less back and forth. And sometimes the smartest move is knowing when to stop. If a conversation has drifted off track, trying to steer it back can take longer than just opening a fresh chat with a clearer prompt from the start. Both are valid moves. The skill is knowing which one the moment calls for. All of this, the troubleshooting, the iteration, is really part of something bigger called AI Fluency. It's not about knowing which buttons to click. It's the judgment to collaborate well with AI across all kinds of different situations. And there's an actual framework behind it built around 4 core competencies. Think of AI Fluency as sitting on 4 pillars working together, not 4 separate skills you pick up one at a time. The first is delegation. deciding what work belongs to you and what belongs to Claude, and how to split a task between the two. It starts with understanding your own goals and what Claude is actually capable of, then making a strategic call about how to divide the work. The second is description, and this is the one you've likely already been practicing. It's effectively communicating with AI systems, clearly defining what you want the output to look like, guiding the process along the way, and specifying exactly the behavior you're after. The third is discernment, thoughtfully and critically evaluating what Claude gives you back. That means assessing quality, accuracy, and appropriateness, and knowing where a response still needs improvement before you trust it. And the fourth is diligence, using AI responsibly and ethically. That means staying transparent about what's AI assisted and taking real accountability for the final result, whatever it's used for. With discernment specifically, there's a practical way to build it out further, and that's through evals. Here's the idea. Your work is unique. Claude might be excellent at drafting marketing copy, but need real guidance on technical documentation in your specific domain, and there's no way to know that without actually testing it. Running an eval doesn't require complex infrastructure. Picture gathering 5 or 10 examples of a task you already do regularly, emails, reports, analyses you've already written yourself. From there, write test prompts that would generate something similar, including the same context you'd naturally bring to the task if you were doing it yourself. Then comes the actual comparison. Run those prompts and hold Claude's results up against your own originals. Does it capture the key information? Is the tone appropriate? What's missing? And finally, refine based on what you find. Maybe you need to add an example of what good looks like. Maybe certain tasks need a human review step no matter what. Either way, that refinement is where the real intuition gets built. So here's the through line tying all of this together. A rough first answer from Claude was never the finish line. It's the opening move. Troubleshoot with specifics instead of vague frustration. Treat every response as something to iterate on, and let delegation, description, discernment, and diligence guide the judgment behind it all. That's what it actually means to get fluent with Claude. Let's walk through the Claude desktop app itself, because it actually gives you 3 distinct ways to work, not just one. Here they are laid out together: chat, cowork, and code. Same underlying intelligence in all 3, but each one is shaped around a different kind of work. Quick questions, complex research, or building software from the ground up. Picking the right one up front changes how much Claude can actually do for you. Let's start with chat, since it's the one that'll feel the most familiar. This works exactly like Claude.ai, but running natively on your machine adds a few things worth knowing. Here's the first one, quick entry. Double tap the Option key on a Mac, and Claude pulls up right over whatever you're already working on in a compact window that stays on top as you switch between apps. Picture staring at an unfamiliar dashboard, not wanting to break your flow. You double tap, ask what the metrics mean, and get your answer without ever leaving the screen you were on. Sticking with chat for a moment, there's more here than typing. You can capture a screenshot or share a window so Claude sees exactly what you're looking at, which is faster and more precise than trying to describe it. And when typing isn't the fastest option, dictation lets you just talk through the problem out loud, useful when you're thinking out loud or away from your keyboard entirely. Now let's move over to cowork, and this is where things shift meaningfully. Cowork is built for work that actually takes effort, pulling from many sources, making sense of it, and producing something finished. Here's the first piece of that, folder access. Point Claude at a folder on your computer, and it reads what's there, figures out what's actually relevant, and saves the finished work back to that same place when it's done. Once Claude has that context, here's what happens next. It builds a plan you can watch take shape, step by step, and then splits the harder parts across sub-agents that work in parallel. Think of it like delegating pieces of a big research brief to a small team at once, instead of working through it one step at a time alone. That's what gives cowork the stamina to handle something a single pass through a conversation never could. And here's something worth setting up once and never thinking about again. Scheduled tasks. A daily briefing pulled from Slack and your calendar, a weekly roundup of what shipped, A morning inbox triage, you define it once and Claude runs it automatically from then on. Dispatch even keeps that same task reachable from your phone, so the work doesn't stop just because you stepped away from your desk. Now for code. This is the full development environment running right inside the desktop app. First decision here is where the work actually happens. Local means Claude works directly with files on your machine, running a dev server you can preview right there. Remote connects a GitHub repository instead, and the session keeps running even after you close the app, useful for a bigger refactor you want to check back on later. Next, you get to decide how hands-on you want to be. Ask means Claude proposes every change and waits for your yes. Code applies file changes on its own, but still checks before running anything in the terminal. And plan has Claude lay out its whole approach first, before touching a single file, all reviewable before any of it happens. And here's the real safety net worth remembering. Nothing changes silently. Every edit shows up as a clear, readable diff, additions and removals laid out line by line, so you always know exactly what changed before it's ever committed. So here's the through line, tying chat, cowork, and code together. It's not three separate tools, it's one Claude, reshaped around the scope of what you're actually trying to get done. Quick back and forth lives in chat. Research and finished deliverables live in cowork. Building and shipping software lives in code. The intelligence doesn't change, only the room it's given to work in does.